So we have Shalini ji, Porus, Panna.
Okay, okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's it.
So how many are we expecting today?
Well, we did not do any registration, etc. So we don't know the number. I did send an email blast. Then again today morning I sent one, and it's there on WhatsApp. So it's just going to be. Let's
Yeah,
see. I
yeah,
hope at least people from our executive committee at least attend.
yeah. I saw your email this morning. I forwarded it to like 15, 20 people.
I
Also made a
saw.
couple of calls. So let us see who else comes.
Yeah. Let me call Dr. Sahloul one more time.
If he does, if he doesn't answer, leave a message.
Okay.
Okay.
Your call has been forwarded to an automatic voice message system. 708935672 is not available.
Hi, Dr. Sahloul. This is Motika from United for Peace. I'm waiting for you to join so we can test audio and video. Thank you. Panna, Panna, are you here?
Yes, I'm on mute.
हाँ.
Did you want me to do something?
वो मैंने तेरे को कल शायद मैसेज भेजा था. वो शफीक children had done a video.
I have uploaded it. I had put it on the thing. Actually, I had seen it on the Neela website.
हाँ. Okay, that's good then. I was looking for it. Hi, Saira. Hi, Rachel.
Hi.
Oh, Imtiaz ji got dropped off. How are you, Rachel?
Good. How are you all?
Good, good. Good to have you here. Can't see you, so but good to have you here.
Yeah, I'm cooking, so I'm gonna go on mute. I don't think you want to see me cooking.
I would like to see what you're cooking. Okay.
Rachel, what got
Hi.
a picture of?
Hello, Dr. Sahloul. Welcome.
Thank you.
Dr. Sahloul, you're on mute.
Oh, hi, how are you doing?
Good, how are you?
Good,
Welcome.
good.
Finally, good to see you.
Good to see you. Sorry, I'm in the hospital,
Oh,
so I couldn't connect earlier.
okay. Do you have a good network though now?
Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Awesome. So I think we have a couple of minutes. We'll just wait for a couple of minutes and then we're going to start the webinar.
Okay.
I would request everyone else who's not speaking to go on mute. Only the speakers can keep their mics on, please. Thank you. So, Dr. Sahloul, the topics that we had actually put in our poster were more about Syria, the healthcare crisis that we have in Syria. Is there anything else you would like to talk about, like the COVID-19 situation and all going on?
Whatever you think it's appropriate for your group and important, I'll be happy to address all of that. Yeah, or if you wanna, have Q&A, which is more interactive, I can start with few comments about the Syrian crisis and highlight of the main important points that maybe people should know. And then we can have more interactive session where people can ask questions.
Sure. So we will have question and answer later on, definitely. For our mission, basically, we would love people to know more about the different kinds of crisis. There are some situations that we are not as much aware. So this webinar series that we have, like one we had in the past was about African American community, the COVID-19 situation amongst them, and then healthcare crisis in Syria. These are pretty pressing topics. We would all love to know more and more about them.
Sure.
Just a minute more and we'll start. I think people are still joining.
It's probably more clear.
Oh, okay, nice. You have a better background now.
Yeah.
So, Dr. Salul, before I start, I just wanted to let you know we have Mrs. Shalini Gupta, who's the president of United for Peace.
Okay.
We have Porus Dadabai, he's the outreach director who will be introducing you.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Welcome, Dr. Sahloul.
Okay, so it's nearly 101. Shall we begin?
Yes.
Okay. So, welcome everyone for our webinar series where we learn more and more about different situations around the world in different communities, and we like to know more about them. I would like to call Mrs. Shalini Gupta, President of United for Peace, to talk about United for Peace and its mission. Mrs. Shalini Gupta.
Thank you, Motika. Welcome, everybody. During this time of COVID lockdown, it's great that we can connect and keep the discussion going on around the topics that are very keenly through these online webinars. So thank you, Dr. Sahloul, for joining us today.
Thank you, Shalini.
United for Peace is United for Peace is a nonprofit organization that was launched a little over a year ago with the mission to create respect and unity in our communities across all differences and to be a voice for nonviolence and peace. So our model is we work locally in the communities where we live, helping people interact and educating them about people who are different, creating respect, and teaching nonviolent methods of conflict resolution. So we work locally, but we are very interested in places around the world where there is injustice, where there's lack of respect, or where there's violence. And we hope to be a voice for peace in the world. We are connecting with all other peace organizations that we come across that have a similar mission so that we can all work in a combined, united way as a coalition. So the voices for peace one day will outnumber the cries for war. So very important topic. Thank you, Motika and Porus, for putting this together, and everybody else who has joined us today. And I'll turn it back to Motika.
Thank you, Shalini ji. Yes, we all do hope that someday people believing in peace will definitely outnumber people who do not. We might help change people's mind. I will like to call Porus Dadabai, our outreach director, to introduce Dr. Sahloul now. Porus?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Sahloul. Welcome to United for Peace and program. Dr. Sahloul's vision is to create a world without healthcare disparities. And he has provided equipment, training, supplies during the COVID-19 crisis to the Navajo Nation residents, which has the highest infection rate in the USA in Chinle and Arizona. And they were also the site where Doctors Without Borders has visited. He has been recognized for his work in the inner city with Imam by none other than our past president, Barack Obama. His mission has gone to several countries, over 12, and they have deployed 627 medical volunteers. They have done 229 missions and visited 15 different countries. They have also provided professional medical services of over $4.5 million. They have partnered with several organizations, including two UN organizations, UNHCR and also WHO. We are delighted to have Dr. Zaher present with us. Thank you very much. And back to Motica.
Thank you, Mr. Dadabhai. That was some really, really wonderful work. I think Dr. Sahloul has such a large area of work that it's not very easy to say it in a very less time. So, Dr. Sahloul, I welcome you to speak and inform us more about the healthcare crisis in Syria.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. I'm really honored and humbled to be within your group. Thank you, Boris and Shalini, for the introduction and for inviting me to join this webinar. And maybe I can start with my reflection on my relationship with the person that carries the name and a lot of power within the Syrian context, within the world itself, when we talk about peace, which is Mahatma Gandhi. When I was growing in Syria, and I'm originally from Syria, as you may imagine from my accent, I came to Chicago about 30 years ago. I read, of course, the work of Mahatma Gandhi, like other high school graduates or high school students in Syria. I read some books about his career in Arabic, translated to Arabic. Syria and India had a great historic relationship from the independence time of Syria. We had your prime ministers, Indian prime ministers, visiting Syria multiple times, especially Indira Gandhi. If those who remember Indira Gandhi and her father, and so forth. The slogan that Mahatma Gandhi had, which I always wrote in my work, not as a physician, as an activist here in Chicago, that they ignore you, they laugh at you, they fight you, then you win. And that became kind of my a motto in my life, that when you start a new idea or a new project, people tend to ignore you. Then they may say, well, this is very minor thing. They laugh at you, and sometimes they fight you, and then you win. And I tried to apply this in many projects that I was part of, whether it's my community organizing, interfaith dialogue here in Chicago, and then humanitarian work and advocacy in Syria and beyond Syria with MedGlobal. I'm a critical care specialist. This is my daytime job. I'm in the hospital today at Christ Advocate Medical Center. I'm on call. So I'm dealing with a lot of COVID patients, as you may imagine. A few weeks ago, I got infected myself with COVID, and I was off for 3 weeks. I had all symptoms, but I didn't have to come to the hospital, to be admitted to the hospital. But I recovered near completely now, and I'm back to work. I still don't smell or taste, which I lost in the third week of my illness. And this is my priority right now, which is treating my patients here in Chicago and my hospitals, and also highlighting the disparity that Boris have mentioned in healthcare between hospitals that have a lot of resources and communities that have a lot of resources, and communities that do not have, here in Chicago, in the United States, in our backyard. A few years ago, when the Syrian crisis started in 2011, as part of the Arab Spring, the same demonstrations that we're seeing right now in many cities in the US and in the world in support of the African American community and against police brutality, we had similar ones in my homeland in Syria in 2011 as part of what's called at that time the Arab Spring. So young people went to the street. They wanted more freedom. They wanted less brutality and corruption from their government. They wanted to have better future and economic situation. And the government at that time responded with severe brutality that led to armed rebellion, interference of many foreign countries, and then we had a civil war that lasted until now. So right now, if you look at Syria, it's divided into 3 areas. So you have an area that is controlled by the government. Assad is the president. You have an area that is controlled by the rebels or the opposition in the northwest called Idlib, which has about 4 million people. Half of them have been displaced from other parts of Syria. You have an area in the northeast that is controlled by Kurdish group that are supported by the United States, by our country here. And of course, everyone is suffering in all of these areas. Early in 2011, I was the president of an organization called the Syrian American Medical Society, SAMS. So at that time, it was a small ethnic professional organization representing maybe a couple of hundred Syrian American physicians. Syrian Americans, like Indian Americans, are doctors mostly and professionals before the crisis in Syria. So we have many doctors in the US, about 10,000 doctors, which is for a country that is very small, Syria, we're probably one of the highest in terms of per capita export of doctors to the United States. About 1% of American physicians are of Syrian origin. So we had this small organization, but we decided that we will become more serious and we will be sending medical missions to support the victims of war in Syria, the refugees. There were 6.5 million refugees in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey, in Iraq, in Egypt, in Greece, and beyond that. At one point, the Syrian crisis spilled over beyond Syria and caused a global refugee crisis, which we're still suffering from the impact of that crisis until now. So for people think that a crisis like Syria would be contained in Syria, it was not contained. 1 out of 4 of the refugees in the world right now are of Syrian origin. There's about 25 million refugees in the world, the highest since the world, Second World War II, and 1 out of 4 of them are from Syria. And that caused a lot of anti-refugee sentiment, anti-immigrant sentiment in Europe and beyond in the United States. That led to terrorism, that led to chaos, that led to instability, that led to xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and many other issues that Europe and the world has been suffering, including the United States, where we had politicians who used this anti-refugee sentiment to create walls instead of opening borders, to talk about the refugees and the immigrants as the others instead of embracing them, to be more exclusive than opening up to the world and dealing with the problems that the world is dealing with. So these issues will come back to haunt us if we do not address them. In my role as president of the Syrian American Medical Society, and then with MediGlobal, which we formed about 3 years ago, we try to address some of these issues, which is issues related to the humanitarian needs of people in disaster regions, whether it's Syria or Yemen or Bangladesh or Colombia, Venezuela, Sierra Leone, other parts, Gaza Strip, other parts of the world. So we recruit physicians and nurses, quite diverse. Actually, we believe in diversity, and this is part of our mission. So in our board, especially the founding board, we have Indian Americans, we have Caucasian Americans, we have Muslims, we have Christians, we have Jews, we have Hindus in our boards because we believe in diversity, because that representative of the diversity of the whole world. Some of the NGOs tend to be more of certain color or certain ethnic group or certain religious group. We tend to represent the shared values of our members. So 650 volunteers came from 25 different countries who have a lot of differences, but they all have shared values, which is believing in a world without healthcare disparity. And this is one of the most important problems that the world is facing nowadays: disparity. Disparity in income, economic disparity, socioeconomic disparity, disparity in healthcare, disparity in education, disparity in resources. You know, we work in areas in Yemen where you do not have IV fluid for a young child who is dying of cholera. So children die of cholera and malnutrition in Yemen because the absence of baby milk and IV fluid. In areas that we went to in Sierra Leone, Sierra Leone is a country that was hit hard by an epidemic of Ebola a few years ago. 1/3 of their healthcare providers died because of the Ebola crisis. A country of 8 million people, they have only one ventilator for the whole country. They have areas that you do not have surgeon who can perform appendectomy for someone who has appendicitis. So children and people can die just from simple surgical and medical condition because there's no surgeon in town or there's no clinic in town. And of course, this is amplified in many other areas in the world. We work in Bangladesh, where you have 1.2 million Rohingya refugees who were the victims of a genocide in Myanmar. All of them are crowded in very small area in Cox's Bazar. We had the few report of the beginning of COVID-19 spreading within the camp last week, and we're very concerned about this issue because there's only 6 ICU beds for the 750,000 Rohingya refugees crowded in very small area in Cox's Bazar. And of course, Bangladesh is one of the poorest countries in the world. So this issue of healthcare disparity, this issue of limited resources in many areas of the world is very dear to our hearts, very important in our mission. So our doctors and nurses, whether they are Christians or Muslims or Jews or Hindus or Buddhists or people who have different faith, we are united in addressing these issues, not only in other countries in the world, but also in our backyard, as mentioned, with the Navajo Nation in Chicago, where we have safety net hospitals that are suffering with limited resources. And every country, as we've learned in the COVID pandemic, has limited resources. Even us, the most powerful country in the world, we have shortage of PPEs, where we had, actually yesterday I was reading a report that 400 healthcare providers in the United States died because of the COVID crisis, because of the shortage of PPEs and exposure to patients. So these issues are important. We have to deal with it. Everyone can do something. Everyone can help. Saving a life of a child or a woman or someone who is hurting in places that are going through disasters. Climate change, displacement, competition for resources will cause more disasters in the next few years, unfortunately, and we have to be ready for that. Governments, United Nations can do their part, but also civic society, organized doctors, nurses, organized citizens can do their part because the challenges are huge and we have to deal with it as collectively. Maybe I can stop at this point and we can have maybe more Q&A about specific issues that you would like to address.
Yeah, a question I would like to ask is about the conflict. We have different people fighting, right? So the hospitals are being targeted. Now, who's behind that? Is it the rebel forces or is it the government forces?
The Syrian conflict is unique in terms of the brutality of the conflict. When we're talking about half the population displaced inside Syria and outside of Syria, 6.5 million refugees.
Dr. Sahloul, I cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so Syria had a population of 22 million people before the crisis. Half of them are displaced inside and outside Syria. So that means there's extreme brutality that were, directed at the people. That's why they're fleeing their homeland. The main reason, of course, is the brutality of the Syrian government and its allies, the Iranians and the Russians. Of course, ISIS and the Nusra, these are a terrorist organization, also were brutal in treating the population in the areas that they controlled at one point. But there's no ISIS anymore, except for very small areas in Syria. If we're talking about the report of attacking hospitals, which is unique to the Syrian conflict, hospitals usually are attacked as a collateral damage in some wars. In Afghanistan, for example, a couple of years ago, one of the hospitals was bombed by the American troops. And at that time, there was a huge uproar in the international community. Doctors Without Borders have press conferences. The American government had investigation and they apologized for what happened. So you see that once in a while in wars. But in Syria, hospitals were attacked systematically. More than 650 hospitals, 650 hospitals were bombed in Syria, according to Physicians for Human Rights, mostly by the Assad regime, by the Russians and the Iranians. More than 950 doctors and nurses in Syria were killed, mostly by the Assad regime and by the Russians, according to Physicians for Human Rights. The WHO has reported about attacks on healthcare in Syria exclusively because of the systematic attacks that is leading to displacement of population, and bombing, of course, hospitals is a war crime. It's a crime against humanity. And this is something that we should not be accepting. One of the problems that we had in the Syrian crisis, that our friends, especially peace groups, did not pay much attention to what was happening in Syria over the past 10 years. So if we talk about the Syrian crisis, people had some ideas, but they did not have deep ideas about the depth of the crisis, the scale of the crisis, attacks on healthcare, use of chemical weapons that was very common in Syria. More than 320 incidents of chemical weapon use, mostly by the Syrian government, were documented by human rights group, by my organization, the Syrian American Medical Society, by the OPCW, which is the organization that oversees use of chemical weapons in Syria, and they assigned blame to the government also. So I think it's important to be well informed about what's happening in Syria, because it's unique and it's leading to displacement of large number of population, and it's against any norms or ethics that we all agree about, and it will undermine medical neutrality, medical impartiality, and the rules of war in the future.
Sure, it is horrible even listening to such things. Do we have any kind of effort going on to rebuild hospitals in Syria?
Yes, I mean, my organization has been helping hospitals to be rebuilt in many areas. We send medical supplies, we send medications, we train doctors online. We have tele health program, connecting doctors in the US with doctors in Syria. We've been sending a lot, of course, money also to help giving salaries for doctors and nurses, because the economic situation is difficult, and we want to make sure that the communities are very resilient. So all of these are things that we are doing. We built hospitals underground for protection. So I worked in Aleppo in 2016 in hospitals that were built about 10 floors, not 10 floors, 10 steps underground for protection of the hospital and the patients and the doctors from bombing. So we went to extreme measures to make sure that healthcare are provided to the local population, because we wanted to stop the displacement and stop the pain that is happening to local communities because of absence of doctors. People in Syria told me that we can tolerate the potential of bombs and missiles falling on us, but when there's no doctor in town, where my kids, if they have fever, they will not see a doctor. The concept that there's no doctor that I can take my kids or my pregnant wife for delivery, that has been driving the population and displacing them more than anything else.
I think a lot of people would like to know about your experience in Aleppo, Syria, especially when during the bombings you were there, right there in the middle of the entire horrible activity that was going on there.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the most painful memories that I have, frankly, from Syria. And every time I remember what happened, especially in the last mission, where Aleppo was under siege and they were bombing on a daily basis, every minute actually, when we were there. At that time, we had a medical mission of 3 doctors from Chicago. One of them is Dr. John Kaler, who's also a co-founder of MediGlobal. He's 70 years old, pediatrician from Chicago. Dr. Samuel Attar, who's an orthopedic surgeon from Northwestern, and myself. There was only at that time one road leading to Aleppo from Turkey. It was very dangerous road. It used to be called the road of death, because every day people who tried to go in or outside from Aleppo, they were shot by snipers, by helicopters, and people died actually. And when we were going from Turkey to Aleppo, we were seeing all of these burned cars on both sides of the road. There was this stench of death because people who died in the cars were trapped, and people could not dare to come and bury them, so they decomposed while they're inside the car. So when you go through the road, you have this strong stench, which is still stuck in my mind. We arrived to Aleppo, luckily, without being harmed, although it was a very dangerous trip. And I worked in this underground hospital called M10. The first patient I saw in the intensive care unit was a child. His name is Ahmad. He was 6 years old. He had a shrapnel in his neck, and he had a shrapnel in his chest. and he was a victim of barrel bombing. Barrel bombings are these barrels, basically, that were stuffed with TNT and shrapnels. It's very cheap way to cause death and destruction, which was used by the Assad regime to bomb neighborhoods and cause mutilation and death among civilians and scare them. It was very effective way of killing people, civilians, bombing schools and bombing neighborhoods. And it's very cheap to be made. So they carry these barrels in a helicopter and they throw it on neighbors. And they have what's this process, they call it a procedure called double tap. That means the helicopter will come and then it will throw a barrel bomb on one neighborhood. So of course you will have destruction and people will come to try to save the civilians under the rebels. And then they throw a second one when people are gathering to cause more harm. Extreme way basically to violate human rights and to cause more death. So that's one of the victims, Ahmad. He was 6 years old. He had shrapnels. He was breathing really hard. We had to put him on the respirator. In the normal situation, because that hospital did not have a neurosurgeon, we would have transported him to the neighboring country, which was Turkey at that time. But because the road was not safe, we kept him in the ICU. Unfortunately, he died for a few days. I remember Mahmoud, who was 7 years old. Mahmoud was with his mom and two brother and sister in their home in Aleppo. His sister Ilaf was 4 years old and his brother Abdu was 7 years old. They were playing in the home and then a barrel bomb hit their home. So both of his sister and brother died instantly. He was saved. His mom was pregnant and she was brought to the emergency room. She was on the respirator when I saw her. She lost her unborn child. Mahmoud was totally traumatized. He had only minor cuts and his life was saved. But when I tried to
ये
talk with
कहाँ से
him, I
म्यूजिक आ रहा है?
tried
बंद कर दो
to
प्लीज.
joke with him in the emergency room, he could not smile. He had this blank feature on his face because of the psychological trauma. So you may imagine how many children in Syria have been traumatized because of the extreme violence that they've witnessed, loss of their families, loss of their homes, the uncertain future. We stayed in Aleppo for a few days. I tried my best to treat the patients in the ICU. Dr. Kaler, so many children also who have conditions related to the bombing and so forth. And then we were able to leave Aleppo without being harmed. It was a miracle. I still have every minute in my memory. I wrote about it. I had many media interviews about it. I even testified in the United Nations Security Council about what's happening in Aleppo, but that did not move the needle. Aleppo was bombed, and then the area was all controlled by the Syrian government or regime after intensified bombing that lasted for a few months.
Very, very sad situation. Just I think it takes a toll on your psychological health also, being in such situation and seeing so much of trauma. Our outreach director, Mr. Dadabhai, wants to ask a question. What can we do to increase the supply of medical professionals globally, especially in the Middle East and underserved communities?
I think first of all,
ये
spreading the
कहाँ से
word
म्यूजिक आ रहा है?
about
बंद कर दो भाई.
Med Global and other organizations
Yash!
that are doing similar things, working in
Yeah,
disaster
music बंद
regions
कर
and
दो
low
please.
resources countries.
Where's the music coming from?
We have a large number of physicians who are applying at our website. We have a volunteer page, so you can direct anyone who's interested
No.
to our website. It's very easy process. We provide orientation. We provide logistical support in areas where we go to, whether it's Colombia or Greece or Bangladesh or Yemen or Gaza. We don't, of course, go to Syria because it's very dangerous. But some of the areas that we go to have some danger and risk inside. Last time I was in Yemen, for example, in November, we had 22 physicians and nurses from 8 different countries who all wanted to go to Yemen to help the Yemeni people. And we spent 2 weeks. We provided training in helping babies breathe, in portable ultrasound. We saw many patients. We performed surgeries. We had surgeons who came with us. One of the surgeons who came with us was the co-founder of Doctors Without Borders, Dr. Jacques Perez, who founded Doctors Without Borders in 1970. And he was the first president. But he joined us in that mission. and he was very happy that he joined us. So direct people and physicians and nurses to our website. They can, of course, if they cannot travel themselves, they can donate. They can spread the word. They can advocate on behalf of the population that we serve. What differentiates us in MediGlobal from other NGOs that are doing great work is the fact that we work with the local communities, with the local NGOs, local hospitals to build capacity. We focus on training, donation of medical supplies, donations of technology that will make these local communities more resilient.
Thank you. Thank you for that answer. Our president, Mrs. Shalini Gupta, she wants to ask which human rights organizations can provide support and protection to you as you provide medical support to people in dangerous conditions.
I mean, there's no human rights organization that can provide protections. I mean, when I was in Aleppo, when we were in Yemen, if a bomb hit, we would be part of the victims. So there's nothing that can protect doctors and nurses who work in these countries. Unfortunately, we still have on a daily basis healthcare workers who die in these countries that are hit by wars or disasters because they are trying to serve their population. We have some security, of course, procedures. We try to make sure that we minimize the risk. In Yemen, for example, because kidnapping is one of the issue, we had guards that are moving with us when we move from a city to another city, following us to make sure that our doctors and nurses who are coming from different countries are protected. And we take these issues are very seriously, but there's always potential risk.
Sure. We have Mr. Samiuddin with us. His question is medical profession is a profession of help, dedication, devotion, and compassion for their patients. What will be your message to a specific group of medical fraternity in India who are openly advocating not to accept or treat patients from a particular Indian community? How your medical association plans to reach out to them to correct their position and thinking? I think this is in reference with some of the uh, propaganda that is going on, I think, by the government there.
I think, I believe that all healthcare professionals, doctors and nurses, should be humanitarians at heart. I mean, they should look at every person equally. People are equal. And whether you are an immigrant or refugee or African American or Native American or Muslim or Hindu, you are all equal in the eye of God. And if we believe in the core ethics and principles of humanitarian medicine, of being a humanitarian, that people are equal, all of them deserve access to healthcare, all of them deserve the same rights that my children here in the United States have, then I think that will change attitude. Sometimes it takes education, sometimes it takes working together. I frankly have done tons of interfaith dialogue in the last 25 years in the United States. An interfaith dialogue is a process where you talk to people and people say, well, my religion says this and my religion says that. But then I reached the conclusion that working together is the best way of interfaith dialogue. Because you tell me that your religion is telling you to help the refugee. Okay, let's prove it together. Let's go and help refugees, Venezuelan refugees in Colombia, or Somalian refugees in Greece, or the victims of war in Sierra Leone, or the victims of war in Syria and Yemen. I think that's really what determines whether your religion and values are put in action or not.
Yeah, that's, I think, being human is the first duty of every single person here. I'll take a break from Q&A. Dr. Sahloul, would you like to speak a little bit about the COVID-19 situation currently in America and in Syria?
I mean, I think in the United States, all of us have been disappointed. I mean, to say the least, in the healthcare profession, on the delayed reaction of policymakers in the U.S. to the pandemic. I think we lost a crucial time in the first couple of months of the pandemic that would have been used to reduce the impact of the pandemic on our population,
Why are you
prepare
coming
for
here?
having more
Are we going to
PPEs,
continue to
ventilators,
have
Yeah, yeah,
the
yeah.
medications,
I want
medical
God,
next
please.
supplies,
episode
contact
tomorrow?
If you
tracing,
want to, please
testing,
don't. I'm
and
conducting the
we
entire
were
meeting.
very late. And I think the rest of the world is looking at us now with a huge disappointment. And frankly, I feel embarrassed that we had more than 1 million patients, more than 110,000 now people who died in the last 3 months or so because of COVID, and we're expecting more. And we are the most resourceful country in the world. We represent 4% of the world's population, but 25 or 30% of the COVID patient who died of COVID came from the United States, and we're still suffering from that. So I think we should reflect on that and hold people accountable and policies accountable. But we still have a lot of resources. My hospital in Chicago, Christ Advocate, has 250 ventilators. We never run out of ventilators. It has more ventilators than maybe 10 different countries in Africa, more ventilators than Syria and Gaza combined, more ventilators than Yemen and Syria and Gaza combined. So we have plenty of resources. The rest of the world do not have these resources, and they will be suffering. And some of the numbers that we are hearing from countries like Brazil and Bangladesh and Pakistan, although are very worrisome, but I think they represent the tip of the iceberg. These are underestimate of the number of people who are affected by COVID or died because of COVID, because there's not enough testing in these countries. So the numbers tend to be much less than reality is. I have friends in Pakistan and Bangladesh who are telling me that there are many people who are dying, and no one knows or counting them as confirmed COVID patients. What we have done in MedGlobal, that we try to do what we can, which is prioritize what we can do, sending PPEs to healthcare professionals. We've sent large number of PPEs to doctors in Gaza Strip, in Syria, in Yemen, in Ecuador, in Pakistan, in Bangladesh, and we're expanding this program to help local healthcare professionals, because if you have one physician dying of COVID in some of these countries, you cannot replace them. One nurse, you cannot replace them. Here we have more physicians, more nurses per capita than any other country in the world. And also we focus on education. So we have many webinars directed to the countries that we are serving, including the United States, on preventive measures, on the proper use of PPEs, on social distancing, on medical care of patients of COVID in the hospitals and beyond. And of course, we have programs that are catered to the healthcare disparity in the United States, whether it's Navajo Nation or inner city hospitals.
That's awesome work. I think that truly is the essence of the entire world as one community, everyone coming together to coexist and help each other. So that was really awesome. If anyone would like to ask a question themselves, please let me know in the chat or on WhatsApp. I will let you ask the question yourself. I'm still taking questions on WhatsApp and here on chat as well. So, in the meantime, Dr. Sahloul, would you like to speak about any other issue that you think would help us be more aware about healthcare?
I think one of the issues that we are living through in the last week is the issue of police brutality and racism, which is entrenched in the policies that we are living through in the United States. And I think we have to be aware that this is a public health issue, and that we have to stand in solidarity with the communities, the African American community that is affected by this. Sometimes doctors and people in the healthcare community are hesitant to use their voice and lend their voice to issues like this because they think it's political, but it's not political. It's affecting us. The same reason that we have COVID patients, African American COVID patients dying with higher proportions because of the fact that they have more comorbidities like hypertension, diabetes, chronic chronic kidney disease, cancer, and obesity. And this is related to the fact that they are very segregated because they live in areas that do not have access to nutritious food. We call it food deserts. They live in areas that have less education than other areas because of our tax system. They live in areas that have less quality public school, so they have and that is translated into more death, more morbidity. In Chicago, which is very segregated city, you have two neighborhoods with two zip codes. One of them have average life expectancy is about 10 years less than the other. One of them tend to be African American mostly, one of them tend to be white. This should not be acceptable. And I think we have to raise these issues. And what's happening to George Floyd and Amadou Arbery and others being victims of police brutality is also part of this disease that is affecting these communities. This disease is racism. The fact that we do not pay attention to what's happening in the African American community. We are not changing the policies, the racist policies that have them having less access to education, to healthcare, to even nutritious food. We don't pay attention when someone is killed in the African American community. Chicago has one of the highest shooting and murders rate, mostly affecting the African American community. I think all of us should be doing something to rectify this problem and lending our voice to our brothers and sisters in the African American community.
Very, very well said. That's what I think we all need to do. And I know quite a few of our United for Peace members are working with the African American community prior to the protest and at this time as well, trying to build more peace and bringing calm and some kind of calmness, order to the mad situation that we have right now. Um, One question we have again is it's about Syria. What have neighboring countries done to assist? For example, Jordan, Turkey, etc.
Well, because what I've mentioned that the civil war happened in Syria, and you had areas that are kind of that are difficult to access from Damascus. Then we started to this operation called cross-border medical relief, where we send medical supplies, humanitarian aid from Turkey, from Turkey to the north of Syria, and Jordan to the south of Syria. And there was a United Nations Security Council resolution that basically made this process legal. Because usually, when you send humanitarian aid to a country, you have to go through the capital, to the government. But because of the situation in Syria and because of the fact that millions of people were not accessible from government-controlled areas, we did this cross-border relief. Many of these countries absorb large number of refugees. In Turkey, there's 3.5 million Syrian refugees. In Lebanon, 1 million Syrian refugees. Lebanon is a small country that has 4 million population. So 1 out of 5 of people in Lebanon is a Syrian refugee. Jordan had about 600,000 Syrian refugees. Jordan is very also poor countries with resources, especially water. So Iraq has 250,000 Syrian refugees. So all of these countries that are neighboring Syria have been affected. They welcomed actually Syrian refugees in large numbers. I think we have to be ashamed, frankly, that our government here in the United States of America, the most resourceful country in the world, closed the doors to Syrian refugees resettlement after they took only 20,000 Syrian refugees. And the Trump administration, the first executive order that Trump administration has done, that they had this travel ban, that they closed the door in front of the Syrian refugees, and they stopped the policy of resettlement. Historically, in the last 35 years or so, or 40 years, the United States have absorbed 3 million refugees from all over the world. And we usually resettle in the United States 50% of the whole refugees in the world that are resettled in other countries. But we've been very unwelcoming to Syrian refugees and other refugees in the last 3 years, and this should be talked about. I think organizations like United for Peace should be talking about the fact, how come that we are not true to our values as Americans, as people of faith? America has been always open to refugees and people who are fleeing violence and oppression and trying to find a better opportunity, but not in the last 3 years.
That is certainly a matter of concern. We just have a nice message for you from one of our members. Thank you so much, Dr. Sahloul. We'll try to continue to support your work for everyone around the world.
Thank you.
We have a question. I think you have mentioned it when you were talking. This will be kind of like a repeat. How active the Doctors Without Borders been in Syria? Do you have any mutual agreement with them? I think you did speak about them, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Doctors Without Borders is one of the NGOs that is always active in disaster regions. We work in coordination with them in some areas. They work in the areas that are outside of the control of the government, similar to us, because the government in Syria do not allow organizations to work in both the areas they control and the areas that are controlled by the rebels. And that's why the Doctors Without Borders, like many other organizations, Save the Children, Mercy Corps, IMC, SAMS, and Med Global, are working in areas that have more need, but and the population who are desperate in the northwest and northeast of Syria.
True. I think we have learned a lot from you. It was a very, very informative session. Before we wrap up, I would again ask if I think somebody's trying to ask a question somewhere. I'll just wait. Somebody's trying to ask a question. They're typing. But yeah, I think, did we have Canada? I think they took in quite a few of Syrian refugees. Yes?
Yeah, I mean, Canada took about 50,000 Syrian refugees so far, and they actually trying to resettle more. Canada, of course, have much lower population than us in the U.S., but they have very welcoming government, very welcoming people, and Syrians, like any other refugees, when you resettle them, when you treat them equally, they feel ownership and they feel that they want to give back to the country that adopted them, and they're usually very educated. They want to succeed. They want to build a life. Many of them have been thriving in Europe, in Germany, in Sweden, other countries that embrace them, and they are becoming very successful. Germany depended on some of the Syrian refugees who are from healthcare background in the fight against COVID. You have many examples of Syrian refugees who thrived and became successful entrepreneurs and business owners and engineers and professionals in the U.S. and other places. And I think we have to treat them as people who deserve, our attention and deserve to have better life. It's nowadays the average time of refugees in the camp is 25 years. So imagine yourself born in a camp as a child, and you stay in the camp for the rest of your life. We have to be more welcoming than we are right now.
I have seen those videos where children live in camps. I did see quite a bit of those videos. They keep coming out regularly, and of course, it is like a horrible situation. The question I have is, I think you did mention a bit when you were talking. How big is the area still under ISIS control, and how many people are still trapped there?
There's no other areas now. There's no areas under the control of ISIS. I mean, you have some few bands of ISIS that are causing some terrorist acts every now and then, but there's no areas that is under control of ISIS nowadays.
Okay, that question was from Mr. Kuldeep Sara, one of our executive committee members. So, I hope we can do something as an organization or as people, just individually, to help each other globally wherever we have any kind of crisis. It's just sometimes there are so many crises globally that it just becomes very difficult to help in so many ways. But definitely, we think that being aware of a situation can open doors and initiatives can be taken. You never know. People are really brilliant. They can come up with ideas to support. And I'm sure learning so much more from you would be, hopefully somebody is listening out there who can come up with a great plan. Um, we would definitely like to move forward and try to see what we can do as well. So thank you so much, Dr. Sahloul, for taking time out, and I hope you recover really quickly from coronavirus after effects.
Thank you
Um,
very much. I'm really honored to be among you, and I hope that we take some of these discussion to heart. We're planting seeds, and some of these seeds will grow to be, long trees, and many people will benefit from them. And although I focused on Syria on this discussion, but there are many people who deserve our attention all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you everybody for joining us for this webinar. We did have quite a bit of a participation today. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Welcome.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Goodbye. Oh my goodness. Shalini ji, your
So the poster started at 1, not 12:45.
1 o'clock, but I'm going to call Dr. Sahloul. Baapre. Should have taken it downstairs. क्या खा रहे हैं ईशान?
मैंने अपने लिए अंडे बनाए थे, उसके बाद थोड़ी सी मिठाई ले ली, एक स्पूनफुल, और अब मैं एक संतरा खा रहा हूँ। ये
Goodness. खा पी के ना इसमें देखियो, अगर कोई श्रेडेड है तो वो छोड़ दियो, बाकी का उठा के इसमें डाल दे रिसाइकिल बिन में, और रिसाइकिल बिन खाली कर दे। आज काकुली आंटी के यहाँ जाना है, रिमेम्बर? Were you listening? Syrian doctor was there talking about health crisis in Syria. He is the founder of Med Global. He's been working on this. He was in Aleppo when the bombing was going on.
What happened?
What? Matlab? In webinar, or like why did we do the webinar?
No, what are you talking about?
We were trying to understand what was going on in Syria and all that. So या नहीं? ये जरा मेरे भी बांध के दिखाना, 2 मिनट मेरे बांधना जरा।
Shouldn't be like that. It should be just comfortable.
There you go.
कंडीशन में कैसा रहेगा? क्या मुझसे से रखना है? कुछ तो हो नहीं रहा है।
What?
कुछ तो हो नहीं रहा है।
कुछ नहीं हो रहा है।
कुछ होता नहीं.
I thought it will do something
You are
like
not
that.
looking for like that. If you do, it will remind you of something to do that. बैठे बैठे लाउंज कर जाते हैं.
आपको अकल नहीं है कहाँ पे क्या पूछना चाहिए? 70 साल की है। काकोली पूछ रही है कितने बजे आएंगे? कितने बजे जाना है काकोली के यहाँ? आशीष, यश, are you upstairs?
क्या?
काकोली पूछ रही है कि कितने बजे तक आओगे? काकोली आके पूछ रही है कितने बजे आओगे? देखो बिट्टू, ऐसा है वहाँ टॉयलेट नहीं यूज कर सकते उनका, तो सिर्फ थोड़ी देर के लिए जाएंगे बेटा, बाथरूम यूज करना। तुम लोग तो पेड़ों को हरा भरा करोगे, मैं क्या करूँगी? कितने बजे लगोगे? यश का मेरा लंच रहता है, मुझे पता था कोई रोटियां नहीं भेजेगा।
तो तुम उठ के कर देती 1 मिनट.
वाओ,
Wow. You shouldn't have started the rotis if you were not able to take it. बीच में खराब होने लगी, मैं बीच में बैठ के रोटियां बना रहा था अपना खाना छोड़ के.
तुमने बनाई है?
हाँ.
तभी मैं कह रही कि इतने में सिर्फ एक ही खराब हुई है।
जैसे खराब हुई, मैंने खाना छोड़ा, बैठ के बनानी शुरू करी. लास्ट की जो 2 बची थी साफ करके फिर मैंने खाना शुरू किया.